Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're going to do a first impressions review of the wildling Chestnut. So we're going to talk about the features, testing, and alternatives for similar barefoot casual shoes for winter. But first, just a little background. I've been using wildling for years now, and this was the first one I got, the Flying Fox. It's now called the Atmo. But just a few things that I like about wildling in general. They have really sustainable materials. They have the highest sustainability standards and ethical standards of any barefoot company that I've found. They're also really light, really flexible, good toe box, and yeah, they just feel natural in general. So let's take a look at the Chestnut. Up front, you've got a typical wildling toe box, nice wide broom, not extra wide, but definitely a solid wide shoe. And the upper is made from hemp and wool, so it's got this really nice kind of sparkly, smooth blend. It's really warm for the winter. Also has microfiber lining around the side just for a little bit of extra water resistance. And then you can't see it, but you can kind of hear it on the inside. It's got a polyester lining just for a little bit more water resistance. So it's not a waterproof shoe by any means, but it'll take a little bit of sprinkling rain. It'll take a little bit of slush, but mostly I would keep it on dry terrain. I just love the look of this shoe. It's like very natural, and this is kind of my favorite thing about wildling, because you look at some shoes and like every brand has a different personality. Like Vivo, a lot of the newer shoes kind of look like space boots, like you're gonna go on a terraforming mission, which is cool. But wildling is just a little bit more like adopting a fuzzy pet, you know, they just look so natural. And another thing I love is that they keep things really simple with the materials. So like this tab here is just the material from the inside of the shoe that they've reused instead of using a different material, which is a little more sustainable and just kind of looks simpler with the aesthetic, which I love. They've got reinforcement here to prevent the heel from rubbing out in the back. And then on the inside of the shoe, it's a very warm shoe for cold weather. It's got felted wool here. So I really like that this shoe is thin, because a lot of times in the winter, if you're doing errands and you're going to a store, or you're going to see a movie or whatever, if you have a super thick boot, like with a thick merino lining or something, it just overheats and your feet start to sweat like crazy. So it's just nice to have a little bit of water resistance, a little bit of warmth, but not too much, so it's a great casual shoe. Flipping over to the bottom, it's got an extremely flexible 3.5 millimeter sole that you can bend in any direction, you can twist, and it's also made from recycled rubber and silica and cork, so it has this really cool visual to it. It just looks like a very natural material. As far as how the tread works, it's definitely meant for roads and for casual. Like, you're not gonna take this on a slippery hill. I went out walking on pavement and there's a little bit of snow and slush, and it was fine for that. But you don't want to take it into puddles, because this material is water resistant, but it's gonna soak through eventually if you get it super wet, or if it's like raining, really, really pouring outside. This is like probably not the boot to go to, or if you're going to a concert where people are slopping beer on the floor, like it's just gonna soak into the upper and it's gonna be gross. So I would keep this for dry conditions. As far as the sole goes, it does have some texture, so you can take it on like dry hills, like if you want to do a little bit of hiking, or if you want to go on some gravel. Like I was walking out to the grocery store and they work fine for that, but they're just super light. You could even do a little bit of running in them if you wanted to, some lower casual type miles. I've run in my wildling Flying Foxes and they're great just because they're so light and flexible, and they've got enough tread for roads. And for flatter gravel and stuff like that. I do find that the polyester lining, which you can hear there, it's not as breathable. Any water resistant material is not gonna let as much sweat out, so I would recommend wearing a pair of merino wool socks. I use Injinjis, the toe socks, which works really well because it creates just more airflow, in between your toes. If you're wearing like just a smart wool or especially a synthetic sock, it just kind of puts your toes together and then they can't breathe as well. So yeah, that's just how I feel about that. But one last word about wildling before we move on to some alternatives. The thing that I like about them is that because they have this similar sole with all of their shoes, you can kind of just pick by looks and what material you want, and then what temperature you want. Like the Atmo, very similar. but just with a cotton upper, and then the North Wolf, which I reviewed yesterday, It's also very similar with a wool upper, but just higher, you know, so it makes it really easy to pick what shoes you want without getting confused about all these different sole types and activities that they're meant for. So yeah. In terms of alternatives, one of my favorite lightweight barefoot boots for winter is the Magical Alaskan. Because it's also super flexible, but it's lined with maybe even thicker wool there. And it does have some water resistance, not completely waterproof, so the breathability is really good for taking it inside. It's got this zip, which I love. This was the first zip boot that I ever bought, and just makes it so easy to take the boot on and off. But then you've got the laces here, so it's got that sneaker vibe, which is cool. Leather upper, and then on the bottom, it's got a semi-aggressive tread, so it does have some grippiness to it. It can handle trails maybe slightly better than the wildling sole, which is just a little bit more geared towards the roads. But it's a pretty tough, flexible sole. It's got a lot of agility to it, and it can take kind of a beating on a little bit more rough gravel, stuff like that. So another option would be the Saltich Ventero, which also has a leather upper, but it's actually waterproof because there is a liner built in there underneath the leather, which is great for winter. It's not as warm as the Wildling Chestnut with the wool insulation inside, but you can stack up a couple layers of Injinji or Smart Wool on top of that to make it really warm. And then for the sole, it's got a 3.7 millimeter sole, so also really flexible, but I do like this tread pattern because it's not very deep, but it's very textured, so I find it actually works decently well on slippery hills. And then it's got a little bit of toe protection there, so this is probably the most rugged out of the alternatives. And then a last option would be the Vibram KSO Eco Wool, which has an entirely wool upper. It's extremely warm. It's not as tall, but it's a great casual shoe actually if you don't mind the toes, which I love because it just gives you a ton of flexibility. And Vibrams are kind of known for not being great for wet conditions, so you know, it's a good alternative to something like wildling, which is also best used for dry conditions. But one thing I like about it that's a little different from some of their other models is that the fabric in between the toes is really thick, so it does give you a little bit better water resistance than you would normally get. But also extremely flexible sole, and Vibram is super tough, so you can use these out in trails. You know, I wouldn't go on muddy hills just because it's not deep enough, but it can handle gravel and dry trails and stuff like that. And also the drawstring is really nice. They've got a Velcro drawstring here, which is very convenient. It's a very breathable shoe, actually really, really warm, especially if you wear a couple layers of Injinji merino wool socks. So yeah, those are some alternatives to look at. And I'm going to be posting a full review on the Wildling Chestnut when I get some more testing in. But for now, if you want to support the channel, you can shop with the referral links below, or if you have questions about the Wildling Chestnut or barefoot shoes in general, you can just let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for barefoot shoes, you can check out my website, barefootwear.org, where you can like filter and search through shoes, so it makes it really easy to find what you're looking for. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.